Morning, everyone. Morning. Oh, crikey, I'm loud as well. I had a really good opening line for you this morning, but unfortunately, Mr. Gove has already taken it. A bit of politics early on. I'm in a school, I'm in a primary school, and a weird thing's happening. I'm walking around, and it's odd, it's strange. A very small child, an 8-year-old child, walks past me in a very odd way, like this. You don't mention it, do you? You don't mention it. You just think it's eccentric. Leave it, Paul. We're all a bit different. Just leave it. Don't mention it. I walk round another corner. There are 30 children snaking through the school, and every single child's doing the same thing. They've got their hands behind their back. They've got their chest puffed out, and they are walking with purpose. I said to the head teacher, I said, look, this is a bit odd. Are you one of these cult schools? I've heard about those. She says, no, Paul. It's fantastic walking. I said, well, it's marvelous walking. I mean, it's some of the best walking What are you talking about? What do you mean, fantastic walking? I said, I haven't heard this. Is this a new DFE initiative? Is this an Ofsted thing? What are we doing? She said, no, Paul, when I came to this school, it was chaotic. And the big kids were pushing the little kids. And I had to do something. I wanted to change everything, but I had to do just one thing. So with love and with humor, she taught the children fantastic walking, and it caught like wildfire. And yes, they are allowed to release their hands from behind their back should they trip over. I walk around another corner, there are 3 members of staff walking out of the staff room. They're doing fantastic walking as well. Everyone's doing it. I watch the parents come over the threshold at the end of the day. There are young mums with prams doing fantastic pram walking. It's a very odd thing. I said to the head, this is a little bit weird. She says, yeah, it has got a bit out of control. When my staff go to other schools for training, they come back and they say, I could never work there. They don't have fantastic walking. And she calmed her corridors not with fear and zero tolerance and no excuses and all of that absolute nonsense. She did it through consistency, what great teachers always do, and what they always provide for their children is an absolute consistency in the way that they conduct themselves, in their relentlessness about routines, in their fun and humor. Compare that to a school I was in Manchester, a secondary school, and every teacher's got a radio. I don't know why every teacher's got a radio. It's a bit odd. I mean, even the maths teacher, when they're teaching, has got a radio next to them. And suddenly, out of nowhere, there's a problem in the corridor, and I hear over the radio, code black, code black, code black, code black. And teachers pouring out of classrooms, running towards this fight that's happening in the corridor. Of course, all the kids have heard code black as well, and they're much faster, so they're there first. Everyone's going nuts, code black, code black. It's odd how people make choices in their schools, right? That's a really odd thing. And what is this about? Is it about magnificent policy and great training? It's about how adults behave. When the adults change, everything changes. When you tinker with policy, when you take on a new strategy, yeah, okay, some stuff changes. But your fundamental change comes with the change of the adults. We need a consistency in our schools that is better than before. We need a consistency where you can't put a Rizzler paper between the attitude of one adult and another. We need a consistency that is visible, a consistency that is audible, a consistency that is emotional in our schools. Instead of the constant tinkering and changing, most of the behavior policies I get, you almost have to weigh them to see if they're any good. They're huge tomes added to every year. And what do we talk about? We'll slim it down, essentialize it. Get rid of the 40 rules and get them down to something more realistic. I'm in a school. I go up to the front of the school. The head teacher's there. She says, Paul, I've read the book. I've listened to the podcast. We're way ahead. She said, don't come with me with the rules thing. She said, we've done it. We've done it. We used to have 40 rules in our school and huge inconsistencies. She said, we've got it down to five golden rules. I said, Margaret, that is fantastic, because everybody knows that golden rules are better than normal rules, right? She gives me that odd look. I said, look, can we just go and ask? Let's go and ask the children if they know what the rules are. She said, we don't need to do that, Paul. I've already explained. because I've done 2 weeks of assemblies, and in each assembly I've gone through the 5 golden rules, and I've repeated the assembly with each year group. They know the rules. I said, go on, humour me. Can we just? So we're walking down the corridor, and there's a small 6-year-old child coming back from the toilet with a tiny key attached to a huge wooden block. He's dragging it down the corridor. I don't know why we do that, but we do. I stopped. I said, look, I'm a funny bloke. It's an odd question, but do you know the rules of the school? He says, is it hats? Is it hats? I said to the head, I said, Margaret, is it hats? She says, no, of course it's not hats. Of course it's not hats. 5 assemblies every week. Of course it's not hats. I said, it's a bit unfair. One of the smallest children in the school, let's go up to year 6. They're busy in year 6. Busy. I go up to one of the girls, I say, look, I'm an odd bloke, funny question, but do you know the rules of the school? She says, ooh, it's a tough one. Is it hoods? It's hoods, isn't it? I said to the head, she's walking away from me. Margaret, is it hoods? Could it be hoods? Of course it's not hoods. Of course it's not hoods. Of course. I said, but it is odd. The first child we asked says it's hats, and the second child says it's hoods. And yet you spent a whole week in assemblies and 5 golden rules. She says, I know what that is. I said, well, I've no idea. What is it? She says, I know what that is. She says, look, Paul, we're in Oldham. It rains a lot. Even in high summer, kids come in with hoods and hats and wrapped up in scarves. And every member of staff stands at the front entrance. When the kids walk in, they all say the same thing. Hats and hoods, hats and hoods. The children think the most important rule in the school is hats and hoods. Why? Because it falls from the mouth of every adult. Why don't you have your home plastered with rules? Because it falls from the mouth of every adult. It's odd to put posters of rules up in schools. I got up to one of the teacher in the room. She doesn't want me there. She gives me that death stare. Get out of my classroom. I got the head on my shoulder. I said, look, I'm an odd bloke, funny question. Do you know the rules of the school? She does the same thing that the year 1 does. She does the same thing as the year 6. She's looking from side to side. What's she looking for? She's looking for the laminated posters to tell her what the rules are. If you need laminated posters, if you need it printed on your teacher planner, if you need it on the VLE, the kids don't know the rules and the adults don't know them either. So we do ready, respectful, and safe, and it's done, and it's learnt in a week, and we move on. And if you go to Leopold Primary in northwest London, you can't walk down the corridor without those words, ready, respectful, and safe, dripping from the mouths of the adults. They don't need posters, they don't need references, because everybody says the same thing. A Rizzler paper you cannot get between those members of staff. Does it mean everything's perfect, we've sorted it all out? No, it doesn't, but it means we've got a perfect baseline to talk about true consistency and bat away those people who try to convince us that it's all about control and authority. It's not. It's about tight agreements between adults. Get rid of your school behaviour policy and put it on one sheet of A4 paper. Get rid of your classroom behaviour plan and get it onto one sheet of A4 paper. Not imposed by a senior leadership team, but created by teachers, for teachers, with parents, with children. Takes a bit of time and a bit of effort, but you'd be surprised about how close we are and what we really want from each other. This is small changes from adults to effect huge changes from children. When I first started teaching, weirdly, I went here. I haven't been back for 26 years. I'm so old. I'm properly old, right? When I first started teaching, and I taught in a place called Nuneaton in Warwickshire by mistake. I have no idea why. You wouldn't take a job there, right? You were just forced into it. And I met a kid called Robert. And I did half an hour of behaviour management training. I'm sure it's better now. Okay. And I didn't really know what I was doing. And I knew I had to deal with Robert because he had his coat on in my lesson, so I walked up to him gently. I'm not an idiot. I'm just naive. I wasn't a fool. I was just under-trained. I walked up to Robert and I said to him, look, could you pop your coat on the back of the chair, please, Robert? In a nanosecond, he kicks his chair back, throws his table forward. With that far away from my face, he delivers every swear word he knows and some that I'm still learning. He runs out of the door, slams the door so hard that the frame shakes, runs across the yard, jumps into the skip, and sets fire to it. I'm stood there thinking, I only asked you to take your coat off. I didn't understand kids like Rob, but I had no idea. I went to other members of staff and I said, can you help me out? They shook their head. They said, I've no idea, Paul, I've no idea. And I realized there was a small percentage of children in the school who weren't going to kowtow to any kind of authority and control, for whom even the single sheet of behavior intentions was redundant. And I didn't know how to deal with it. I had no idea. I had to learn from people. And you know what? I realized at exactly the same time that it wasn't just Robert in this school that was going from 0 to 100 miles an hour in a nanosecond. There were fully grown adults doing the same thing. And I couldn't understand, because I wasn't experienced enough, that distressed behavior. We can track it now, right? We get that now. But I couldn't understand the 46-year-old adults that are doing it. I mean, when that 5% of teachers meets that 5% of children, you get real chaos. I'm working with a physics teacher. Anyone? All right, we're safe. It's okay. He's a stickler for the rules. You know people that stickler to the rules. It's black and white. And Mr. Brennan, it was black and white. We had a rule in our school, don't wear Nike ticks, don't wear logos, don't wear Dolce & Gabbana. You just wear a plain black jumper, right? The word went out to the children. And most of the children, they couldn't afford to go to the uniform shop to buy a plain black jumper, right? So they went to Asda's, always plural. Okay. You know you're working in a tricky school when it's plural. They went to Asda's because Asda's was cheaper, right? To buy a plain black jumper. They couldn't afford to go to the uniform shop. They went to Asda's, and the Asda's jumper, it was plain, but it had a tiny little logo on it, like a nothing, you know, like a Fruit of the Loom emblem. Do you know what that is? Oh, yeah. Not a badge of honor in youth culture, Fruit of the Loom. But Mr. Brennan's from a different generation. He doesn't understand that. He's standing at the gates Monday morning, he's watching the children coming in, and he sees plain black jumpers, and then he sees this little logo. He says, "You boy, Fruit of the Loom." He said, "Oh, me, sir." He said, no, it's from Asda's. It's from Asda's. He said, "Take it off." He's taking jumpers off the kids. He's got them lined up against the fence. He says to them, "Fruit of the Loom! Fruit of the Loom!" He's one of those teachers. You know one of those teachers, right? I mean, if you don't, it might be you. Bit awkward. One of those teachers who tries to control the behavior of others on the edge of their temper, and there's nothing more like nectar to a 13-year-old or a feisty 9-year-old than seeing a fully grown man about to lose his mind. And if you get that little bulging vein at the side of the head, it's double bubble, right? He's walking up the driveway, 9 o'clock in the morning, he's got an armful of jumpers, he's pleased as punch. He snaffles them in his store cupboard, spends the rest of the day patrolling the corridors on the lookout for Fruit of the Loom jumpers. But kids are quick, kids are fast, they see an adult and they just want to poke him, they just want to tip him over the edge, they're walking past him trying to goad him in the corridors. Fruit of the Loom! It's like, by third lesson, they're bunking off their lessons to go up to his little science rectangular window so they can put their jumpers up against it and scream through the door, "Fruit of the Loom!" and then leg it down the corridor. He's out the door, bang, "Fruit of the Loom! Fruit of the Loom!" The man's in crisis. But he's our friend. So we sit him down, we say, "Owen, stop. Let us deal with it. Let's just knock a door, run. They've got you." He's lost to it. "The rules," he says, "the rules." We're having a bad week. You might be in the best school in the country. I bet you have bad weeks. And you're just begging for Friday, right? Even though it's Monday at 9:30. You're just begging for Friday. We've been there. You think we get to Friday, the weekend will reset it and it'll be all right. But it's chaos. The jumpers are being stacked up in the physics store cupboard and he will not give them back. He refuses to give them back. The parents are phoning up. The kids are freezing cold. He will not give them back. And you just hear this constant refrain of "Fruit of the Loom." Next time you hear someone losing it, right, just whisper that as you walk past. Just checking. We get to Friday. Oh, man. you remember Fridays in education? A beautiful thing used to happen on a Friday lunchtime. Go on. We went to the pub. We went to the pub to have a drink. See if you can get through the afternoon half cut. Of course I never did. Of course, it's being filmed. Of course I never did. Mr. Brennan went to the pub. On a Friday lunchtime, we got the skeleton key from the head teacher and opened up the cupboard and released the jumpers. But we're in a secondary school, so nothing's labelled, right? I've got my year 7s going home with very long arms. Some of the year 11s in a tight fit. It's all right. Monday's coming. Monday morning, I'm standing on the gates. I swear to you, there are more Fruit of the Loom jumpers coming in on the Monday morning than there were leaving on the Friday night. The kids had gone to Asda's with their own money, bless them, to buy a Fruit of the Loom jumper just to wind him up. He walks into the staff room Monday morning, of course. There's 6 of us there with Fruit of the Loom jumpers. And he finally gets it. He's not a bad man. He's not a bad teacher. But you know what he's done for 30 years? He's done exactly the same process. He says, your behavior filters through my emotion, so I grab for the big stick. Because if I can find the biggest stick off the top shelf, I can smash your behavior, and it will never happen again. Nonsense. Total nonsense. Our responsibility as parents, as adults, as educators, is to stand aside. Your behavior, our standards, the next step. This bit, this relationship between the adult and the child will not be damaged by the ups and downs and the to's and fro's of teenage years or growing up and developing. This relationship is too valuable to throw down like a white glove every time there's a bump in the road, and there are bumps in the road. Your behavior, our expectations, the next step. It seems like the simplest thing to do on a Saturday morning at a fabulous festival, but you know when you're in your classrooms and it's Thursday and you're exhausted and it's the same child, that stepping aside is difficult. When you're a newly qualified teacher, it's even harder because everything is personal, even though everybody tells you it's not. But maybe at the core of what we need to do is that shift to the side. Who's a parent here? Put your hands up. Those that admit it, there you go. I'm a parent too. We're going to Disneyland, right? Paris, let's not go nuts. I'm going to Disneyland Paris with my kids, right? And I told them 3 months ago I was going, and what have they been asking me every morning for the last 3 months? When are we going? When are we going? When are we going? And finally the day has come when we're going, right? Now look, I know that I should have booked a flight, but I've booked to drive, right? It looked like it was cheaper and I'm a bit tight, okay? And now I realize I've got 14 hours. 14 hours in a car in a metal box with my own kids. It doesn't sound like a holiday, okay? No matter. I'm preparing for the trip. I'm packing up. We're all getting in the car. I'm getting everything sorted. Now, there are rules in your homes. I know there are rules in your homes because you're sensible parents, right? You'll have rules about screen time, how much screen time you can have, what the device you're on, and what time of day you can do it. I know you do. You're good parents. I expect you have rules about sugar. How much you can have, if you can have it at all, what kind of sugar it is, and what time of day you might be eating it. Of course you do, you're great parents, but stick me in a metal box for 14 hours with my own kids, all bets are off. I'm chucking Haribos in the back like there's no tomorrow. There's a Nintendo D. Where did that come from? I don't know, I Spy books if you're from the 1950s. Anything just to shut them up! Because what a nice drive on a nice holiday, okay? So my kids are in the back of the car, tweaking with Sugar Rush like that. I normally say my partner, but my wife's sitting here. So my wife is sitting in the car next to me, right? I get in the car, and we're ready to go. Sports car. Left-hand drive. We're not even at the motorway before it kicks off in the back. So what intelligent behavior management strategy do you use on your own kids? You stop the car, don't you? Ah! We're not going! Kids in the back. Ah! What do you mean we're not going? My wife's sitting next to me in the front. Oh, here. Really? We spent quite a lot of money on this holiday. It's quite a rash decision, 0 to 100 miles an hour, because it feels good. It feels like you're doing the right thing. It feels like you're in control, but it's utter nonsense. I see people doing it with 3-year-old children. With 3-year-old children, they do this. Pick it up. Pick it up. If you don't pick that up right now, Granny will slip on it and she will die. You'll have to deal with that for the rest of your life. 0 to 100 miles an hour. I went from 0 to 100 miles an hour when I realized that I couldn't get through Robert and his anger and his frustration, and I had enough. And 3 weeks after starting to try and teach Robert, I found myself marching down the drive because I wanted to go and see his mum. I'm going to go and see his mum. And everybody said to me, don't do it. Don't do it. You know what they used to say? They said, you're not a social worker. I said, I'm just going to go and see his mum. I don't see that's a big step. I said, I'm going to go and see his mum. I caught myself walking down the drive, shouting at myself. You know your mental health is dodgy when you're shouting at yourself, okay? I walk over the threshold of the school to the pavement. I'm determined to go and see his mum. I'm going to sit her down. I'm going to sort it out, and then she's going to help me. I've got it all in my head, right? And as I walk onto the road, I notice someone's walking with me. It's Mrs. Smith. You've got a Mrs. Smith. She's been in the school forever. She knows everybody in the community, every parent, every grandparent. Anyone that walks in the door knows Mrs. Smith. I got Mrs. Smith next to me. I said, Sue, I don't need you. I'm going to go and talk to his mum. She said, you do. And we go up onto the estate, up onto Blackertree and Nuneaton, and we start walking past the houses, and a funny thing happens. I hear voices coming out of the houses shouting, Mrs. Smith's coming! Mrs. Smith's coming! All the way up the road. I said, Sue, you've been here before, have you? She said, yeah, a few times. And I'm at the front door of Robert's house, and I'm about to walk in, and I've got my speech, and I've got my crime sheet, and I'm going to sort it out. And I walk into Robert's home, and I realize this isn't my home, and that's not my mum. It's funny what you remember, right? There's a bar fire, you know, those little electric fires, and it's blasting out heat, and yet it's already hot. And there's nothing in the house. Everything's been sold, or it's just nothing in the house. And it's all piled up onto a sofa. All the stuff that must have been on the floor has been piled. So you can't sit on the sofa. So I sit on the edge of the sofa, and she brings me a cup of tea, but you wouldn't drink it. And I look in her eyes and realize she's drunk. Well, at least I assume so. She's not with us. I don't mean drunk from the morning, drunk from the night before drunk, and I freeze. Because I don't know what to say to her. And although I've got all this stuff I want to say about his behavior, and it all seems so irrelevant, it all seems so pathetic now that I'm actually there. And Sue takes over. And she has the most amazing conversation with this mum. And whenever people say to me, some parents don't care, I remember that conversation. Some parents aren't able to help in that moment, but every parent cares, and every parent, regardless of their state of mind, every parent wants the best for their child. And I watch this most amazing conversation unfold, and I can't speak, I can't say anything, and we leave the house, and I say to her, Sue, I'm sorry, I haven't done much good there. She said, Paul, you won't have had the effect you wanted to have, but you may have done something good. In the next few weeks, Robert, instead of running into my room and running out again, he runs into my room and stays there, which is a double-edged sword, because he's not easy to teach. But we persevere. We persevere. And people come up to me and they say, how'd you do that? And I say, what do you mean? How'd you do that? How'd you get him to come to your lessons? How'd you get him to work for you? How'd you do that? I say, I don't know. I went to see his mum. Oh, it's social work. And they walk away. And what Robert needs is a hand, right? My good friend Mike Armiger explains it as some children just lie on the floor, right? They lie on the floor metaphorically in front of you. And some teachers offer their hand, in fact, most teachers offer their hand to try and pick the kid up. The only decision you have to make is, when are you going to take that hand away? Because I know some teachers that will take it away with wrong uniform, wrong haircut, wrong attitude, looking at me in a funny way. And I know other teachers from our Prus, from TBAP, who will just wait. And Robert waits until the feckless or the temporary people have taken their hand away, and he looks and sees who's got the hand there, and he'll take your hand and he'll do anything for you. The only decision you need to make as an adult is, are you going to take your hand away? Or is it still there as an offer of help? I'm not suggesting that life is a consequenceless utopia where we just build relationships and everything's all right, but for those hardest to reach, you come to Robert with your rules and your expectations and your strategies, and he'll blow them away. Come to him with connection and kindness and patience and resilience, and he will walk everywhere with you. What we need in this country is a revolution in behavior. I'm afraid what we're being offered is not that at all. It's retrograde. But I have confidence. I have confidence in the fact that our message is out there, that adults are changing, that you see shaky hand gang and hot chocolate Friday and short behavior policies and ready, respectful, safe and restorative conversations that work. And you see them rippling through our country, not from the top down, but from teachers who recognize that that is the way to make change. I am utterly encouraged by the faces here today. You are going to have such a fantastic day, and I thank you for allowing me to be just a little part of it. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you so much. It's wonderful, beautiful.